Hi, Michelle Vincent here. I teach at a public charter school in Southeast DC. I teach pre-kindergarten students. And so I was able to conduct my read aloud in my classroom with students that I was familiar with. We had, I think, 12 students, and they had heard the story several times before. So during my read aloud reflection, I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I thought went really well and some of the things that I thought could use some growth. So in our classroom, a read aloud is a 20 to 25-minute component where we have the children sit on the carpet and we really try to engage them in the skills of listening and focusing on whatever story that we're reading. Knowing that I'm dealing with pre-K students, I really try to keep a routine that helps them get into consistent mannerisms for what it means to listen to a story, to answer questions about a story, and to follow along as the teacher's reading the story. I think that this takes a lot of pre-prep. So I'm always focused on reading the story several times before I read it to the children, using Post-its and sticky notes to help me remind myself of points that I want to bring up to the children, even from beginning to end. So introducing the story, the format of the book, the parts of the book, those kind of things. So that's the first thing I want to talk about today and show you a little bit of in my video clip. I think that went really well for me because it's a practice that we've been doing since the beginning of the school year. You'll notice that in preparing the story, I use Post-its to remind me to talk about the parts of the book, to talk about the front cover and the back cover, to talk about what the book is made up of, the title, the author, and the illustrator. I think that this consistency really brings the children to that place where they remember, okay, we're about to read a story. It's important to sit down and listen. I know the parts of the book. And then after I have them in that routine, then I like to ask them a really engaging question. In some academic circles, I've heard it called a hook, something where you try to get the children connected with the literature even before they listen to the story again. And I think that went really well. So let's take a look at how I introduce the book, and then I'll pause again and we'll talk a little bit about the hook.
Story today, okay? And I'm really excited. This is a really good story. So let's sing our song. Are you ready? Sing it, sing it. But first, let's talk about the parts of the book. What part of the book is this? What part of the lyric? I love how she makes it quiet again. The front cover. Everybody say front cover.
Front cover.
So what part of the book is this?
Back cover.
And how about this, Jazzy? The spine. Okay, so these are the parts that make up a book. And I have a very important question. Nala might already know what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask her to put her hand down and give everybody a chance, though. What is on the front cover of my book that tells me what the story is about, Kamari? What is it? The title. Good job. Give me some, Kamari. The title tells me what the story is all about. And then guess what? Can I get you guys the title really quick?
Yeah.
Right. Turn your listening ears all the way up. Turn your listening ears all the way up. All right. Everybody say, watch me. Where the wild things are. Everybody say the title with me. Say where the wild things are.
I think it's also important to make sure that you're flexible when reading the text. You'll notice that one of the children sitting up in front pointed out a sight word that they saw in the title of the book. I thought it was important to pause, ask her about that word, and then give her some kudos for being able to identify that word in the text, to continue to encourage her to seek out sight words when she's reading a story.
All right. What does that word say? What does that spell? Good job. Okay, so there are also two very important names on the front cover. Do you know what those names are, Nala? The author and the illustrator. And guess what? Today, the author and the illustrator are the same. This story, Where the Wild Things Are, is written by Maurice Sendak.
Now for the hook. I think that this is also something that went really well in my read aloud. Whenever I have an opportunity to go through a story and try to pick out points or things that I think that will really engage the children, I like to make tangible props or something that they can touch and feel or talk about that will really help them to continue to connect even after we finish reading the story. Well, in this case, I thought, Max is a little boy who is wearing a costume. He's got a crown on. Wouldn't this be really cool to bring out this picture from the literature and have it so that the students can use it and play with it? They can touch it, they can look at it. It's closer. I can pass it around while they're listening to the story. And also, once I'm done reading the story, I can include this in my library so that when they go to read the story by themselves, they have sort of a prop or a puppet that they can use to engage in the literature that they're reading. What I thought went really well here is that the students loved my question about what Max was wearing. We talked a little bit about what Max was wearing, and then we were able to make a text-to-self connection where they talked about costumes that they had worn before. And in fact, I clip it out of the video because it takes a while, but every student got an opportunity to share what costume they had worn before, how they felt in those costumes, what they enjoyed about it, the costume, and I really think that that engaged them. So when it was time to read the story, that was something that they had already connected with, and they were ready to listen more.
So this story is all about our friend Max, and he uses his imagination a lot. So we want to see what Max does. But look at Max. Does he have on regular clothes, or does he have on a costume? Have you guys ever worn a costume before?
In retrospect, one thing I may have changed here is instead of asking the students that closed-ended question, is Max wearing a costume, I may have changed it to ask them, what does Max have on, or what do you notice about this image? And that would give the children an opportunity to answer the question based on their own ideas and their own reflections. During the read aloud, I think it's really important to ask the students lots of higher order and lower order thinking questions. Not only does it keep them engaged, but I think it prepares them for what they will face when they reach kindergarten and have to master Common Core standards, such as being able to retell a story, being able to pull out key details, being able to talk about the characters' emotions and expound upon how those characters feel. So you'll find that during this read aloud, I have places where I ask impromptu questions. What do you think is going on here? How do you think this character feels? Why do you think this character feels that way? But I also have planned that in my read aloud as well. So there are post-its where I specifically put, ask the children about this character here, ask about emotions, talk about how they feel. And when there's room, we're also able to make those text-to-self connections where we talk about emotions, which I think is really appropriate for this age level. Let's take a look at some of the areas where I asked those higher order and lower order questions.
What are you doing right there? He's trying to scare the dog. Let's see what happens. What do we smell with? Press your nose. Take a deep breath in. So what do you think Max smelled? Where do you think he wanted to go? He wanted to go home. What is he doing on that page? He's happy. So what can you say about Max's feelings on this page?
While there were lots of things that I thought went really well, there were also some things that I thought could use some growth or perhaps some more planning or just a little bit more expounding. Let's talk about a few of those points. The first is the way I introduce vocabulary. I think that for a basic introduction, it went well. I used my graphic organizer, I had the word written, and during the text, when the word came up, I explained the word to the children and had them say it and play around with the word a little bit. In future read-alouds, I think that I probably will introduce the word before I read the story, introduce it again when it comes in the text, and then give the children an opportunity to utilize the word. So perhaps write it on my whiteboard or allow them to rainbow trace it or just give them a little bit more familiarity and practice with those vocabulary words.
A forest grew. Can everybody say forest? Can you clap out the syllables in forest? So that's one of our vocabulary words.
I also thought that I could have incorporated a little bit more movement. You'll notice that when the children got to the point in the story where the wild things roared and gnashed their teeth, that we did some of those movements, but we still stayed on our bottoms. And I noticed that I lost a few of the children in terms of attention because the story continued on for such a long time. So incorporating a wiggle break where they're able to use their gross motor skills a little bit more, I think would be helpful in keeping them engaged. Maybe allowing them to jump up and down, to stand up on the carpet, to party like the wild things. And I think that this will help the children get a little bit of those wiggles out while still connecting with the story.
And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible.
Another area I thought I could work on is looping conversation. So during the read aloud, I did ask the children questions and even gave them opportunities to ask me questions about the text. I think that the next level could be to model what it looks like to dive deeper into a thought or an idea concerning the content of the literature. So if I ask a lower order thinking question, what is Max doing? Then the next follow-up question would be, why is he doing that? How might you do the same thing? Where have you seen that done before? And I think that this helps the children dive deeper into comprehension of the text, what's happening in the text, and how they can relate that text to outside experiences. Overall, I think the read aloud went well. I was able to cover a lot of material, a lot of content while reading the text. I think the children were mostly engaged. I think they've really enjoyed the story. I want to thank you all for taking out the time to listen and reflect with me today. If you have any questions that you jotted down during our time together, please feel free to comment below or to send me an email. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and to having more dialogue with you. Thank you again for taking the time to listen today. Have an awesome day.